Hello, and here we are. After the Trouble Brewing characters tier list, I thought I'd do one for Sects Violets. So yep, there's all the characters minus the Travelers, and as I did with the tier list for Trouble Brewing, the placement will be based on my perceived usefulness when playing the script, rather than just what the character is doing on paper, which will explain some of my potential hot takes later on. Anyway, so let's begin. Clockmaker. I think Clockmaker is the strongest tier townsfolk. But even outside of Sects Violets, it does a lot to solve the game. But especially in Sects Violets, where the effects of the minion abilities are so obvious. Clockmaker is pretty game solving on its own. Like, in a Vortex game, not so much, but in pretty much anything else. It helps detect Fangu jumps, it helps think about who could be a bigger kill than minion. It makes the evil twin extremely sad as well. I do not believe that there should ever be an evil twin and a sober clockmaker in the bag. And that is one of few exceptions that I'll make to my usual rule of you should not be able to match the bag. Evil Twin being the closest to the demon is just bad. Fangu mitigates it kind of, because with Fangu, the demon can change places eventually. It's also pretty good with Fangu and Pit Hag because the demon could really go anywhere. But otherwise, it's a little bit on the OP side. I don't fancy that so much. Dreamer. So I'm provisionally putting Dreamer in A, while I think through my reasoning. So I think Dreamer is a little out of place on the script, simply for being the only character that is almost impossible to bluff. So a Dreamer in a Vortex game pretty much gets nothing. Absolutely nothing at all. No good information. So if you have Dreamer as a bluff in a Vortex game, that's viable. But also people are going to eventually kill you anyway. In any of the other three cases, Dreamer is the only townsfolk that is capable of cold calling someone's role without knowing it, and without having any means to know what that person's role is. Now, of course, if the Dreamer selects something like the Snake Charmer or the Mutant on night 1, it's not going to be super helpful. In theory, an evil player could bluff Dreamer by simply Dreamer confirming, in quotation marks, the members of their evil team until they have a proper grasp of what everybody else is claiming, but I still don't really like it. I would not put Dreamer as, I don't think it's ever an S character. Dreamer is helpful for game solving, but a lot of what you can do with the Dreamer depends on how the storyteller treats it. Dreamer, especially with no Dashi, is dangerous for evil because you have to be very careful about what kind of misinformation you give. My own personal favorite misinformation is showing the demon as a minion, and or vice versa, but still maintaining the correct bluff to be shown as the good role. I don't know if the Dreamer is more an A character or a B character. I've not really seen Dreamer be the major cause for the good team to win the game in any SMV that I remember. I guess I could leave it in A because technically even just the fact that Dreamer is in most cases self-confirmable is very powerful. It's also very powerful to find hidden outsiders, but beyond that, I think there are other characters that solve the game more. Clockmaker definitely does. So yeah, I think Dreamer can stay in A. Snake Charmer. Personal confession, I hate the Snake Charmer. I do not like what the Snake Charmer does to the evil team. I think if you're in a situation where you're a minion and you've been playing a banger and then suddenly your demon gets Snake Charmed and they have no way of getting back to the evil team, and so they have to out it, or they just choose to out it because, of course, they're good now, so they have to wait for their new team. it just creates a sour feeling in my mouth. It's not really my favorite thing, I'll say. I don't feel this way about Magician and Puppy Grower. I can't really explain why, but I just think that Snake Charmer is out of place here specifically. It's not that bad. I think with the fact that there's Fangu, there's a Barber, there's a Pit Hag, the demon can move around. Or, you can just be poisoned, you can be sweeted or drunk. Snake Charmer in itself is not game solving when they stay on the good team for the entire game. But I've very rarely seen evil win games where the Snake Charmer hits. And usually those games are won by evil because the storytellers overcompensate for the Snake Charmer actually hitting, which is also something that I don't like. It's not really a character that I personally enjoy seeing put into the bag. I know that most other people like it, especially folks who enjoy Risk. And I think A is pretty fair. I would err towards it being an S tier, depending. But I think for S tier, the Snake Charmer would have to be a major. It will have to play a major part in the good team winning in every single game, and I think that only really happens when the Snake Charmer manages to find the demon, and the new Snake Charmer most often wins with the good team. Mathematician. Mathematician is one of my personal favorites. I think it's an amazing townsfolk. It's just, I really enjoy the part of solving for your own information, and all of my top 5 is characters that have to solve their own information. Mathematician is currently in spot number 3. It gets a bad reputation for being a difficult townsfolk to play, and also a difficult townsfolk to buff, to be honest. But I love the Mathematician. So, I think Mathematician is probably somewhere between B and C on the script. As a character, it's very situational. You'd only want Mathematician on scripts where malfunctions are possible and somewhat traceable, depending on claims. In a Vortox game, the Mathematician can be useful to determine that it's Vortox by getting constant zeros, if other wards have been ruled out. But in games with a Fangu or a Vig, it becomes less useful. Well, with Vigor Mortis, it depends on whether or not there is a Vigor kill and whether or not the player who has been poisoned by the Vigor Mortis killed minion would actually get information in the night. I find Mathematician most game solving when they are not Nodashi poisoned in a Nodashi game. So I would say B is probably fine. I could see the Mathematician in C as much as it pains me to say it, because it's an amazing character. My favorite script that I've ever worked on is a Stormcott Mathematician script. But yeah, that is probably where it belongs. Okay, Flower Girl. Okay, you're going to love this, but I think Flower Girl is the worst possible townsfolk on this script. Maybe not the actual worst, but here's the thing. So on paper, Flower Girl is amazing. Flower Girl can solo solve a game if people always vote with the Flower Girl in mind, which they're not going to, even if you play online. That is going to happen in maybe a minority of cases. It doesn't matter that it's SMB and everybody knows that a Flower Girl exists. The Flower Girl is going to die before they get meaningful information. In most games I've seen, at best the Flower Girl can roll out 2, maybe 3 people from being the demon in the early game, which, considering how mobile the demon is in the script, doesn't really mean very much. Flower Girl in Vortox can be strong, but again, they have to survive for long enough to actually find who the Vortox is, and people have to vote in a way that makes it possible for them to do that. Hard Flower Girl Vortox check on day 1 is one of my favorite things, but it doesn't happen very often. But yeah, honestly, I also think that the Flower Girl, I will probably redesign the Flower Girl if it was me. Because in in-person games in particular, it's almost impossible to play Flower Girl without significantly slowing down the game and basically outing yourself. Like, I don't know what sort of memory other people have, but when the clock hand is running, even when I'm playing online, I have trouble tracking all the votes. And if I had to be the Flower Girl in an in-person game, I would massively grieve. Just no, give me anything else. Pit hack me. Fuck it. Town Crier. Town Crier, I think, is also somewhere between A and B. I'll put the Town Crier in A. I think in SMV, considering how damaging the minions can be, how you pretty much need to figure out where the misinformation sources are, having a Town Crier and successfully executing your minion candidates as the Town Crier can be really helpful. This is nomination dependent, so to some degree the evil team can still mess with it, because if there are, say, 5 nominations each day and the people that nominate are overlap but not so much that you'll be certain where yes or no comes from, then your information can be good or bad depending on that. But overall, Town Crier is a solid role, and getting a yes on one single player outside of a Vortex game can be very powerful. It just rules that player out from being the demon, which late game can be very helpful. I like the Town Crier. My opinion of the Town Crier has improved after I've played a few games as the Town Crier, and that has really helped me so. Oracle. I think Oracle is also somewhere between A and B. The first night of information that an Oracle is going to get is basically just going to tell them whether it's a Vortex/Vigor Mortis game or not, in most cases, or if there's been an early Fango jump. Overall, I think Oracle is kind of a weaker Undertaker if we had to compare with a role that's not on SMV. But it does capture the information of whether or not the players that died at night are evil, which the Undertaker does not. So it's fine. I wouldn't say that the Oracle ever really solves much on their own, but it helps with the identification of the demon type in ways that most other characters do not. So that's a good thing. Savant. I'm also very conflicted about this placement. I think it should probably be somewhere between A and B, but I'm going to put the Savant to B, even though the Savant is my favorite character in this entire game. The reason is Savant is highly storyteller dependent, and also highly context dependent. A Savant that lives long enough can have information that pretty much closes almost every world. A Savant that lives 1 or 2 days, or a Savant that is run by an inexperienced storyteller, not so much. So there's a statement, the statement, the outsider count has been modified, that is a personal pet peeve of mine. Please do not give this statement to a Savant in SMV. What you're telling them is, it could be a Fango game, or it could be a Vigor Mortis game, or you could be no Dashi poisoned, or it could be a Vortex game. This really does not help the Savant in any way. It is not good information. Please do not do this to your Savants, people. If you want to give information about the outsiders, give information about what they are, where they are, who they're next to, what they're doing at night, who's choosing them at night. Do not fall into the trap of saying the outsider count has been modified just because it's easy. Yeah, so main reason I will not put the Savant any higher, especially on the script, is even if you solve your information, what you get is determined by a lot of factors that don't really help with solving very much, usually. And yeah, I think Savant in particular is very useful on scripts with moderate droism, not too much, not too little. I love Savant in Vortex. I think a Savant that gets 2 false statements every day is really strong. in a backwards fashion, but it still is. Seamstress. I'm kind of tempted to put the Seamstress in S, but I'll do A just because Seamstress is... I think Seamstress is probably the strongest townsfolk on the script that's not the Clockmaker, in terms of what it can do. It is an OPG, it is dependent on Vortox versus non-Vortox. The results of a Seamstress check can be changed by a Fangu and or a Pit Hag, but generally speaking, like, the social information that you get from knowing whether or not two people are on the same team or aren't is really strong. Seamstress in particular, much like Artist, helps with reducing worlds in ways that not a lot of characters can do on the script when it comes to making choices. So Seamstress is one of few townsfolk that has agency, and I think that's really important. Dreamer has agency. Snake Charmer has agency. Out of the townsfolk that we've not done yet, Philosopher has some agency, and Artist has agency too. Juggler has some choice, but note how all of the other characters do not have agency. The information that they receive depends exclusively on how the game plays out, not on their own choices. And the specific agency that Seamstress has is very strong. Maybe I'm biased. I do like Seamstress. I think Seamstress is very underrated on SMB. But that's where I'm putting it. Philosopher. Well, I mean, I think Philo is easily an S tier choice. I don't consider Philo to be the strongest townsfolk necessarily, because it's kind of a choose your own townsfolk, so to me it's not a character, so to speak, but basically if you're the Philo, you hold it for an either 2, get the lay of the land, and then decide in the scrim what's the ability that would be most useful. You can have a double Seamstress check, you can have a double Artist question, a double juggle, hard to pull off, but possible. Really good, really, really good. Also, you can use the Philosopher to confirm the information of another player. Like the Clockmaker, you have a Clockmaker claiming a 2, you want to know if that 2 is correct or not, go follow Clockmaker. Then if you get a different number, you can think about why. Do not go follow Flower Girl unless you hate yourself. Artist. I think Artist is another A to S character. I'll put the Artist in A for now, but I think there's a strong argument for S. My reasoning for Artist is very much like Seamstress. It's a character that has agency, that has kind of a low floor and a high ceiling in terms of what it can do, and a lot of it depends on when they time their question and what kind of question they ask. Artist is popular as a Vortox check in games with SMB beginners, but I think that honestly is not the best use for it, because Vortox eventually becomes evident from the combination of other information sources. And more often than not, if the evil team believes that they cannot fake a non-Vortox game, they will also claim Vortox information. So if you are the Artist, as much as you can, try not to use it for a Vortox check on day 1. Vortox check later on, if there are worlds where it's Vortox and worlds where it's not, and you're kind of split between which demon candidates you have depending, that makes sense. I can respect that. Alright, Juggler. I think Juggler is also A tier. Probably. Juggler can confirm a lot on day 1, depending on who their choices are. I think the main usefulness of Juggler is to try to find outsiders and or evil players. But of course, whether or not they actually do depends on how willing the group is to hard claim to a Juggler, because Juggler is also an S tier bluff. But Juggler as a bluff is so good. It's kind of like Gambler, where if you feel that you're a role that really wants to be confirmed, like the Sage, you might be more willing to claim to a player who can confirm you, or is claiming to be able to confirm you. A Juggler 5 in Worlds Where It's Sober is really strong. It basically tells you, oh yeah, you can trust these 5 people, just kill everybody else and you're good. Bar Pit Hag, Bar Fangu, there's a few ways that the information can become out of date, but that's also the point of SMB. Like, if all of this information, all of this, could never become wrong, even though it started correct, then good will win pretty much every SMB game. And good already wins almost 60% of them. Sage. I think I'm happy to put Sage in C. Just so that we have one townsfolk for every tier at the very least. But apart from that, like seriously, Sage is not great. I think Sage is a best C. A Sage that is killed on night 2 or night 3 and is sober and gets a demon ping that cannot be moved, cool. Like, you solved the game. Bravo. Clapping hands. But in any other sort of game, usually the Sage gets identified as such by the evil team, or because they're claiming information that the evil team knows is wrong, or gets mistaken for an outsider and executed to close Fangle words, which is also kind of sad. If they get pit hagged, or witch cursed, or serial locked, they also pretty much cannot do anything. And in a BOTC game, a Sage is basically just a knight that needs to die to have their information. It's not great. I get why it's there. Having Sage in the script is not wrong. There's a lot of powerful roles that want to just kind of claim Sage, imply Sage, to avoid being targeted too early. Of course, that makes sense. But other than that, it's not great. I can't say I've ever seen a Sage solve the game for good in SMB. If you got an example of that, I'd be happy to watch it. Genuinely. So, Mutant. Again, I have bias. I think Mutant is S tier. The madness is so good. Like, also, Mutant is genuinely a really fun role to play, and it can be quite difficult to distinguish a mutant from a lying evil player in a double claim, which I think qualifies as helping the evil team more than enough. It's also pretty good to just give Mutant to a Dreamer in a BOTC game, or on an evil player that you don't know the bluff of in the early stages of the game. Because they can just say like, oh yeah, I've seen you as the mutant. Yeah, but I'm not the mutant, obviously. Because why would you say that if you were the mutant? Sweetheart. B? Question mark? I'm not entirely sure about this one. I think B is probably good enough. Like, while the Sweetheart is alive, they're not really doing anything harmful for good. By the time that they die, they could do something damaging or they could not, depending on who's alive and who isn't. I think pit hacking a player into the Sweetheart and then killing them is a pretty good move. But also, if you kill a Sweetheart in the night, then good knows at that point that the Fangu jab has either already happened or is not possible. Well, until someone else gets potentially pit hacked into an outsider, that is. But I think there are stronger outsiders in the script. Barber, I think Barber is about A. So being able to Barber swap really adds to solving for where the demon is for roles like Flower Girl, Town Crier, whatever. It's pretty good. Again, timing matters a lot in terms of how much this character actually helps the evil team. Pitanging a Barber is a very strong choice. Making an evil Barber is an amazing choice. But it still requires that evil Barber to die to do anything. So in the end, if what you want is a swap, it will not do very much if the demon hood can only go in another place. Assuming it's a 12-player game. Klutz. I also think Klutz is in A. A, perhaps B. It depends. Maybe I want to put the Klutz in B, actually. I think the threat of potentially ending the game for your team is strong. It drives up the paranoia for sure, but thing is, a Klutz that dies early probably is not going to pick an evil player, and a Klutz that dies late is not super likely to change the outcome of the game for their own team. I've seen a few Klutz losses. They're not generally losses that I think wouldn't have happened without the Klutz, if that makes sense. But here's the thing, so if the Klutz chooses an evil player, the world where that player would have otherwise been executed is the world where either the Klutz player specifically is wrong about the evil team, or a world where that evil player is trusted and therefore is probably not going to die anyway. Now, in a situation where a minion is trusted and the demon is not, sure, that changes. In the situation where the Klutz is just not listening to town about who may be good or evil, that changes. 80% plus of the time? No, don't think so. It's still good, it's a great role to have, but it's not, I don't think it's the outsider that I would be the most scared of as a good player in an SMB game. Evil Twin, right in the trash where you belong. I don't think this is an unpopular opinion at all, honestly. Twin wins are super rare, and so this is not completely mechanical, this is more social, but the dynamic of being in a twin pair, I don't think there's a lot of players who like it. It's fun when you have an evil twin and a pit hag, and you can use the pit hag to onboard the other twin onto your team. And then suddenly on night 3 or night 4, somebody gets twinned, and they're like, oh, well, I see what happened. But if you have a pit hag, you can kind of onboard whoever you want, to some degree. And I do not like the aspect of having essentially an outed evil. At some point, the twins are going to have to come out, right? Because one of them is going to be put up for execution, so they're going to claim their good twin, and that so-and-so is their evil twin. That always happens, even in games where the twins are initially hidden. And that just, apart from the situation that it creates socially, it's just, there's one outed evil in SMP, which is a script that's already kinda easy to solve for good. Why? In every game I've seen with the evil twin and the pit hag, one of the first things that the pit hag does is pit hag the twin into a different out of blame. And I cannot blame them for that, because it's so rare to actually hit the evil twin win condition. Like, seriously. One thing that I've never seen that I would like to see, and that might change my opinion of the evil twin, is a bigger killed evil twin. Because then the ability is still active, and the good twin has reason to be afraid of dying. Which, let's see. C? B? Which is one that's hard for me to rate. It is very gameplay dependent. The ability to kill one person per day is really good. It's great. Like, it's close to psychopath levels, but you don't have to out it to do it. The problem, people need to make nominations. And there's only one player that you can curse per day. And if that player does not nominate, then you're kind of a blank token until further notice. A witch in the late game can self-curse and accelerate the pace, but that also comes at the cost of removing an evil player from the board, which is not always a great decision, because if the witch is also an evil candidate or a demon candidate, then they can kill themselves and potentially remove an execution for good, but if that execution was going to be them anyway, shrug, whatever. So I think a witch that hits often can go up to A tier a witch with an average amount of kills can be in B, but I'm going to keep the witch in C just because the other mains are the Cernobus and the Pit Hag, and I think they are just a lot more helpful. Cernobus, I think, is a strong A character. But maybe closer to us, but I'm keeping it in A. Mostly because it's easy to tell when Cernobus madness is faded, so when the Cernobus is died. Otherwise, an evil player has to fake Cern madness. And that also limits the options of who could be the Cernobus with whom on their own evil team. Yeah, I think Cernobus is great. This is a script where outsiders have reason to hide, the mutant needs to hide, Snake Charmer has reason to hide. There are so many roles that have incentive to not claim what they actually are, that the Cernobus locking away the main sources of information into some other claim that puts them in conflict with a different player is actually really strong. Or, you know, you can make the play of making someone mad as the Clockmaker on day one, and other people will say, well, we can kill you, you're the Clockmaker, you don't care about dying. Sometimes that works. I've been in game when I was Cernobus and I've done that, and it worked. Yep, and also getting kills for madness is really, really fun. Well, that's so fun for the player who actually gets murdered for it, but it's always a choice to maintain madness or break it, right? One thing that I don't see enough is the Cernobus execution being made with having in mind that the player that was in the block was a good frame, even if they are not evil, so that everyone thinks that they're evil and then the day after they come after them again. Yep. Sarah is good. Sarah is really good. Nothing else to say about it. I will reluctantly put the Pit Hag in S because I kind of have to. I mean, any game with a Pit Hag in SMB ends up with an extra evil because of the Fangu. And I'm just going to do these two characters together. I don't think that there's anything much that I need to explain, but you make anyone you want an outsider that you know is out of play, or you try. Then you make your demon the Fangu if they're not the Fangu already, and boom, jump. Pit Hag and Fangu are also the only evil characters that can swap the demon's seat to some other seat. Whether that's good or evil doesn't matter. Barber is the other character that can do it, but that's a good character, not evil. And these are more or less under the control of the evil team. Pit Hag specifically, like if you have a Pit Hag and there's a Fangu in the script, make somebody else the Fangu. Try to remove one information role, make them an outsider immediately, and then dump them. That gives you such a big advantage, genuinely. Having an extra player on your team, even if it costs you one dead player, because the Fangu has to jump, so the OG Fangu will now be dead, that is so great. Also, some people may just trust the original Fangu and go claim to them, thinking that surely this is not a jump. Personally, I do not really love Pit Hag on SMB. I think Pit Hag is more interesting in places where it can make outsiders that have reason to hide. That's not just there's a Fangu on the script. So, you know, Pit Hag on scripts with Drunk, Damsel, Hatter, any other outsiders that are very damaging for good. Or, you know, things like Goon, Politician, that you can get Pit Hag and then say, oh, well, I can play for the evil team if I want to, so I'm not going to say anything about this. In SMV, Pit Hag mostly just has the purpose of adding an evil player to the team, making a bunch of outsiders that you may or may not want to kill, and then it's just kind of done. Like, there's not much reason to do anything else as the Pit Hag, unless you want to make the funny play of turning someone into the Snake Charmer and then telling them who your demon is and Snake Charming them, which would be entertaining as content, but also if you're in one such game and you're playing with your friends, they may not find it as fun. I am not for betraying your original team. Taking them as word on day one does not count. Being Fangu jumped does not count. But like, starting evil and doing something that's actively against your demon for no particular reason is a type of play that I don't endorse. I recognize that it's valid, I just don't think it's great. That's me. Yeah, so Fangu is strong. Like, Fangu is, I think, the 4th strongest demon according to Clocktower, and one of the only 4 that have a positive win rate. Like, adding an evil player is strong, being able to swap places is strong, like, it weakens Flower Girl information, it weakens Snake Charmer information. It does a lot. Can also mess with artists, seamstress, etc, etc. Fangu is a solid demon. I don't love playing with Fangu because I don't like what it does to the outsiders, but I reckon that it is a well-designed character that does a great purpose. Vigor. Can I just chuck the Vigor in D? Can I just do that? I'm going to do that. I'm not going to ask for permission. I'm kidding. Yeah, I mean, okay, Vigor Mortis is a character that has a very interesting ability when used well. I will argue that in SMV specifically, where Vig is, well, where the demon ability is the only thing that can change the outsider count, and if you're the Vig, you're stuck with one less outsider, and one of your evil players will need to bluff outsider or just output it's a big game, then it's not that great. Sacrificing a minion in the early stages means that you won't have as much voting power, and I think having voting power on a script that has Flower Girl and also Town Crier is kind of important. So I don't know. I feel that Vigor Mortis is one of the consistently weakest demons on the script. I would rather be any of the other 3 than the Vigor Mortis. The only argument I can see for Vigor Mortis being a good starting demon is if you're starting with a Pit Hag. Then it's the 2nd strongest combination to just starting with Pit Hag and Fangu. Because Pit Hag and Fangu can onboard whoever they want, whenever they want. Pit Hag and Vigor Mortis, you have to spend the night to change the Vigor Mortis into the Fangu, and then make somebody an outsider and jump. But you're also a lot more likely to hit. Because there's only one outsider in play instead of 3. So you have a 3 in 4 chance of knowing which outsider is out of play. And that's ignoring the case of just getting an outsider as a bluff, which in a big game you would usually give, because there's a big in play. So like, you pit hag the out of play outsider that you learned on whoever play you want on your team, and then bam, jumped. No dashi. Oh, I think it's hard for me to place Vortex and no dashi without thinking about them together. So I'll try to do that. I think I will put Vortex in B and no dashi in A for now, while I think about this. So here's my observation. In most games I've seen of SMV, in any circumstance in which the good team was not certain what kind of demon they were dealing with until the later stages, there was at least at one point either a no-dashi or a Vortox. Potentially could have got pit hacked out of play later, but it started existing. And the existence of the no-dashi on the script is the reason why I'm not putting the Vortox lower, even though the Vortox is one of my favorite demons ever. But no-dashi in itself is a pretty independent demon in the sense that the misinformation that it creates is given by their own ability, and you can choose to use it to sell a Vortox world if you think that it will work, but you can also choose to use it to simply clear, in quotation marks, the 2 townsfolk that are poisoned by the no-dashi with the misinformation given to the no-dashi. When it comes to the Vortox, you don't really get a choice. unless you're aiming for the Vortex Wincon, which is extremely rare. I don't think I've ever seen it happen in SMV. Like, the main tool that you have for covering for Vortex is using Nodashi as a source of misinformation. I like Nodashi. I think in a standard 12-player game where you have 7 townsfolk if you're in SMB, because there are no other modifications to outsider count, and 2 of them are poisoned, that is a decent sizable chunk. And some outsider placements and or some minion placements make Nodashi harder to figure out than others. So the strongest Nodashi games are games where the poison players, or at least one of the poison players, is at least like 3 or so seats away. Which in some cases can happen, and especially if you have a mutant involved, can be hard to trace for most of the game until the mutant is actually dead. And the Nodashi's neighbors are not super likely to die. So the other thing about the Nodashi that is pretty great is you can direct your kills based on who you think is poisoned, and you'll know who's in your evil team. You only need to locate 2 outsiders to know for sure where your tentacles are reaching. That's pretty damn strong. But yep, it's not quite as strong as Pangu, again because no haha brr extra evil. And the main issue with Vortex is also that eventually the good team figures it out. Probably immediately if they have an artist that uses their question in the most meta anti-Vortex way possible. But other than that, like, the Vortex is not great in this script. I think Vortex is a demon that belongs more on scripts that have other ways of misinformation. It needs a bit more. The minions in SMV are just a tiny bit too loud for the Vortex to have the cover that it definitely needs. And I think that's about it. That is what I think of the SMV characters. I will be very happy to hear from you in the comments if you're so inclined. Let me know if you agree or if you disagree and why. And I will eventually put up a tier for BMR because, of course, we've only got 1 script left. Might as well, right? And with that, have a good day. I'll see you in the next video.